The first moment when you wake up seems to be a pretty pure version of yourself before your emotions or logic really kicks in. What do you think? This is Jewish Life 101. Welcome to Jewish Life 101, the podcast where we tackle any topic from a Jewish perspective, from the way that a Jew would look at it. Today's topic is waking up. It's the second part of the concept of waking up that we're talking about. The first part was last episode, which is Waking Up 1 Part 1. Check there first before listening to this episode, preferably, but for this episode, it will not be necessary 100% to listen to it, although recommended. For next episode, which is a continuation of this episode and last episode, it would be more necessary to listen to the first two episodes. In the previous episode, we explained why it is important to think about something meaningful right when you wake up, because it can have an effect on your day, on the way that you continue your day, or at least it will affect that beginning of your day. Then we introduced the sentence which Judaism tells us to say at the beginning of the day, and we gave 4 explanations on that sentence or parts of it, which carry different lessons that we could carry through our day. In this episode, we're going to bring in a 5th explanation. This explanation will bring in a concept that will add an extra depth to this sentence, and with that extra depth, we will be able to re-explain the first 4 explanations, and afterwards, we will try to connect all the explanations to show that really they're bringing out one point. Today, we're going to explain the 5th explanation, and we're going to re-explain the first explanation. Before we start, I'd like to point out that you don't need any background information in order to listen to this podcast. Anything that we will talk about or mention that will not be 100% or fully explained here, we will note that we have explained that at a different time, or that we will explain that at a different time. I would also like to point out that this episode will have more information, deeper explanations than other episodes, and can potentially be a little longer than our average episode. And that is because tonight, the night that I am recording it, is called Pesach Sheni. Everyone knows about the first Pesach, which is Passover. 30 days later, there's a second holiday called Pesach Sheni, which is translated as the second Passover, which is connected to the first Passover. And like I said in one of the early episodes, when it comes to a holiday, we like to usually add in something. So although I haven't added something by the first Passover, I'm taking this opportunity to do some sort of addition, which will be in this episode in the more extensive explanations and probably longer length. Let's get started. The 5th explanation needs a little bit of an introduction. In Judaism, there's a concept of purity and impurity. Some forms of impurity have the effect that it makes it prohibited to pronounce God's name, to say God's name. One of those forms of impurity falls upon a person when they sleep. So when they wake up, they're not allowed to pronounce God's name until they do a ritual hand washing. Maybe we'll explain this a different time, I'm not sure. But Torah says that there are different forms of impurities that have this effect. Not every form of impurity, but certain forms. Nevertheless, before we get to the moment of that ritual hand washing, because it is the first thing we do when we wake up, we say this sentence of Modeh. This sentence does not have any one of God's names in it, but that also shows that on a concept level, the concept of this sentence cannot be made impure. It cannot be made impure or imperfect. Nothing can affect it. That shows that this concept in the Jew is something that is not able to be made impure or affected. The reason for this is that there are different levels of the soul of a Jew, and the deepest level, the essence of the soul, is different from the other levels. The other levels can become impure and can be bruised. But the deepest level cannot become impure. It cannot be bruised. Because it is completely unified with God himself. Why is it specifically completely unified with God himself? And how does that affect if he can or cannot be made impure, etc.? The more shallow levels of the soul are the expressions of the essence of the soul. Each different level is a different expression. For example, one level is considered the expression of logic of the soul. Another level is the expression of emotion of the soul. Those parts connect to God through their expression. So the logical part of the soul connects to God through logic. There are two outcomes of that. The first outcome is that logic cannot grasp God himself. God is not in a specific image in general and not specifically of logic. There's no image of God. So when logic is trying to grab onto God, he's trying to grab onto some sort of logical image. Therefore, only can grab onto are expressions of God that are put into logic, or logically understood expressions of God, not God himself. Another outcome is that the only connection he has to God is what he logically understands. That means that it can change on a scale. He can understand more and have a bigger connection. We can understand less and have a lesser connection. Which means that there is a level of having less, and there's a level that it can even be damaged or bruised or incomplete. And that can be comparable to the concept of being impure. Not so the essence of the soul. The essence of the soul, just like the essence of a person, which really the soul is the essence of a person, you do not say that it changes. You do not say that it's put in a specific image. The proof is that if, let's say, someone was completely awake versus if they go to sleep or even faint, God forbid, you're not going to say that it's three different people. The person himself is the same. His emotions, his logic, etc., all the images about him, all his expressions have changed. But he himself is always the same. Because he's not based off his expressions or whatever different emotional or logical images or otherwise or physical that there is. He is just him. So too the essence of the soul, or really the same thing, is the essence of the soul. The essence of the soul is not a form of logic. It is not a form of physicality. It just is. Therefore, it can also connect to God, which does not have a specific form, rather just is. Because there's no form that it has to fit into. Also, because its connection is not based off a certain form, rather its connection is a connection from one essence to another essence. That connection is like, for example, that of a father to a son, or any relatives, where the actual deepest part of that connection, at its core, is not breakable nor changeable. Because there's no image to base it off of, you can't have more or less of nothing. Its connection is just a connection. There's nothing that can therefore affect it, because there's no rules that connection is being based off of. So why is this part, the deepest part of the soul, expressed in the beginning of the day when he says Modeh, when he says this sentence that Judaism tells him to say? Because in that part of the day, he has not yet worked on his logical connection to God or his emotional connection to God. He hasn't worked on anything. He just woke up. His day has not even started yet. Therefore, the only part of him that can connect to God so far is a part which is not connected based off any action or feeling that he has. It is solely based off of his existence or his essence or who he is. And that is an amazing pillar to start off the day with, because everything else in the day can be an outcome of that. I have this unbreakable connection with God, and that will power and empower all the other actions I have in the day, and keep that constant reminder in my mind that that's who I am. Someone who is connected to God, no matter what. It's also, again, brought out in Modeh the fact that it cannot become impure, which, again, can only happen conceptually if there's nothing to be made impure in the connection. There's no specific image that could be more or less that it's based off of. Based off this fact that we brought in, that this sentence that we start off our morning with is a sentence which is an expression of the essence of the soul, we're able to re-explain the other four explanations from this perspective, that it's coming from the essence of the soul. Before we do that, I'd like to bring out another point, that because this essence is completely connected with God himself, without any other factors really, there's no image that he's connected to, therefore he sees things really from, or he feels things really from God's perspective. He recognizes God's perspective. Not so the other levels, since they have a certain image that they're connected to, they have some sort of a worldly or non-God-based perspective, such as logic or emotion. They have a logical perspective, they have an emotional perspective, and they give that some form of importance. Obviously for them, because they're part of the soul, the godly soul, their main focus is God, but there's some form of importance for something external. That difference will play out in multiple of the upcoming explanations. The first explanation, I'd like to give another small introduction, that we're going to talk a little bit about the difference between the perspective of the Jewish soul and the perspective of everything else in the world. I'm not trying to properly explain the difference between, let's say, the Jewish soul or the non-Jewish soul. I'm going to try to make a difference in perspective on if the Jew considers spirituality is the main or only importance, or physicality is the main or only importance, and that the way that Judaism explains it is that Jewish people, soul has the first concept more than the second concept. Everything else in the world, other than the soul, or even to an extent the lower parts of the Jewish soul itself, has more leaning towards the second way. The first explanation re-explained. What do we say in the first explanation? We said that we're thanking God for making us alive. But that's not exactly the line. We don't say, thank you, God, for making me alive. We say, thank you, God, for returning my soul. Not for giving me life. Not for making me alive, but for giving me my soul. The question is, that implies that I'm thanking God for my soul, for what I had previously. Now, there's two separate concepts. There's living, and then there was my life with what I had in it, which is seemingly my soul, meaning my Jewish soul. Seemingly, even if you say that there's something different about the Jewish soul than the non-Jewish soul that a Jew would appreciate, there's still the very concept of living. A non-Jew would also have to, when he wakes up in the morning, also should be thanking God for giving him life. Life is an enjoyable thing. Any form of enjoyment, he has to thank God. So why is it that we're only thanking God for this? And the answer is because Modeh, this sentence comes from the essence of the soul. We stated that the difference between the essence of the soul and the more shallow parts of the soul are that the more shallow parts of the soul come through a certain expression and therefore consider a certain importance for that expression alone, independent of God, on a very, very small level, but at least some form of importance. Not so the essence of the soul does not give it an importance. Therefore, living a life without the Jewish soul simply would mean living a worldly life. We're living a world-based life instead of a God-based life. Now, for the more shallow parts of the soul, there is an importance for that itself. I can thank God for that itself. Yes, there's an extra level that I also get to live a life where there's a big main focus on godliness, but I would also have to thank God for the very fact that I'm living a worldly life. Not so. The essence of the soul does not, because it's looking from God's perspective, and God himself sees the world and everything in it as completely unimportant, as completely nothing, so to this part of the soul also sees the world and everything in it as completely unimportant, as completely nothing, and therefore nothing to thank God for. You're not giving me anything. Rather, what is he giving him? Only this spiritual opportunity to connect with God, which comes through his Jewish soul. Now, imagine there was a pile of $1 million and a pile of $1. Which one's better? Anyone will tell you the pile of $1 million. But nevertheless, there's still something in the $1. The $1 million is a million times better, but the $1 still has something to it. So the very fact that there is some form of enjoyment in the very fact that I am living, even if I don't consider it something important, but there's an importance to it, I should still thank God for that because of the enjoyment that it has. Even though I look at it as like really it's like not anything real or what, etc., but there's still something to it, right? That other people enjoy it. Someone who doesn't have this enjoys it. The lower parts of the soul itself enjoy it. So there is enjoyment there. Even if I don't look at it as something with an importance to itself, but there is an enjoyment there, right? So now we're going to bring a parable and bring this a step further. Imagine that there was a king and a prince. The prince lived his life following the king, loving the king, admiring the king, living with the king. His life was based off him. And he was living the lavish life in the palace, and he was living with the importance of knowing that he's the next person in line to take over the kingdom, which is part of why he's observing his father. He's seeing what his father does as king, and he admires his father's position as king. What if one day he was taken and told that he's going to live in the barn? He's never going to see his father again. He's never getting to the power position, and he's not living that lavish life. Yes, in the barn, just like the animals in the barn, he will be fed. Maybe he'll be even fed good food, and he'll be given good drinks. And that's a form of pleasure that the animals around him themselves are enjoying. So you would say there's a pleasure there. But the son himself, from the drastic change in life and having everything taken away from him, will be disgusted with this life. He'll think that this is not a life worth living. Now we could say the same thing over here. So too over here, the essence of the soul, even though for other things it may be enjoyable, but from the soul's perspective, from the essence of the soul's perspective specifically, worldly things are not enjoyable. Worldly things are completely nothing. So if I were to be ripped away from the godliness that I appreciate and thrown into such an existence, I'd rather do without. Therefore, the only thing for me to thank God for is my spiritual godly soul. Let's take this a step further. This prince in the story, what does he find bad about his situation? He doesn't find his existence bad. The existence that he has himself is good. The proof is that if he were to exist in other contexts, he would still be perfectly fine with it. He doesn't like all the negativity that came in the drastic change. Not so the essence of the soul, the very existence of being a worldly being itself is something he does not appreciate. Let's bring an example. There are two cases. The first case is that there's, in front of a person, a lavish feast. He's sitting by the feast, he's hungry, and he's been waiting for hours to be able to eat it. And then one of the waiters comes up and he announces, "Everyone, don't touch the food. We just figured out the food was poisoned." The person will not touch the food. The person will, if he wasn't naturally hungry, but rather just looking forward to the food, he'll stop being hungry, and he might back up from the table just to stay away from it. He'll completely lose interest in the food. Now the question is, did he lose interest in the food itself, or it itself? Did he stop liking, for example, tacos or steak? Or is there a side point which made him stop liking the situation? The answer is, obviously, he still likes food. He still even likes this food, technically. But he doesn't like the food the way it is because of the negativity in it. So too with the prince. He likes living. He just doesn't appreciate the life he's in because of the negativity in it. Now the second case. The second case is, imagine if someone had a pile of trash in front of them. The person will not approach the pile of trash. He will not take it home with him. He would rather stay away from the pile of trash. It is something not pleasing for him to be in front of. So the question is, what does he not appreciate about it? Does he want the pile of trash? There's just something negative about it, like the odor it lets out, or that it looks messy? Or does he have zero interest in trash? It itself is not something he has interest in and gives zero importance to. Obviously, the latter. On a general case, in the average case, people are not looking to take home trash cans or piles of trash. They prefer to leave it where it is, and that is actually why they dispose of it, because it is not pleasant for them. So too the way the godly soul looks at it. The godly soul sees from God's perspective. That means that there is zero importance for anything in the world. Not only is there an importance, but he recognizes that from God's perspective, there is no importance, meaning that he feels something about it. But he also recognizes that what he feels is not true. He doesn't feel like there's anything at all of importance in the existence of worldly things. Not so even the more shallow parts of the soul itself. This soul is named the godly soul because all of its faculties are solely based towards God. So even the logic of it, for example, is towards thinking about God. If a Jew thinks about God, that is coming from his godly soul. Rather, the difference between it and the essence of the soul, even though they're both focusing on God, is because it has that aspect of logic in it. Therefore, it gives a form of importance to logic. Because, very clearly, because it's using that. If it didn't give a form of importance to logic, then it wouldn't make a difference if he logically understood it or not. That importance is similar to the prince. He has an importance to the concept, but because of his recognition of God and how God looks at it, he will stop liking it and rather decide that he's not interested in it because of the bad associated with the good he sees in it. Meaning, even on a general level, someone who didn't have a godly soul would be able to recognize that there's an existence, I see an existence, and then I know that God sees the existence as something not true, not real. I forgot to point this out. We will probably explain a different time what exactly it means that God sees the existence of the world as something not true or not real in the slightest. It's a little bit more of an extensive and interesting discussion, but let's continue. Therefore, they see it like the prince. They see the importance of the thing itself, let's say of the world of logic, and they see how godliness looks at that. Therefore, the lower parts of the soul would still, even in this level, have to make two different things. Thanks for the existence of, let's say, logic, the existence of a worldly life, and then the fact that that life itself is false. So thank you for also giving me a truer life of living a spiritual or a spiritually in tuned life. Now, so the essence of the soul looks only at the spiritual life because the physical life has zero importance on any level to it. So there's absolutely zero reason for it to give any thanks. And this is a pillar towards his for his day, because he can continue his day knowing that really the only important thing is God, and therefore what God wants. So my life, the rest of my day will be what is important. I know that deep down I feel that what is important to me even, and what is important in life, is this concept. It's the concept that what's important to me and what's important in life is what's important to God. Because that is the only thing that truly matters. So to sum it up, today we said two explanations. We said the fifth explanation and we re-explained the first one. The fifth explanation was that this prayer, this sentence comes from the essence of the soul, which is different than the more shallow levels of the soul. The essence of the soul cannot be affected negatively because it is connected to God himself without any image. Meanwhile, the more shallow parts of the soul are connected through an image, and therefore that image can change, and therefore their connection can change, and they're also not connected to God themselves. They're connected to the expressions of God that fits into their specific images, and also therefore they have they give a certain importance to those images, meaning something external from God, a worldly concept. And that leads us into our re-explanation of our first explanation that explains that the essence of the soul says, thank you for giving me back my soul. Because it recognizes that if we're to have a different soul, if we're to have a life of a non-Jewish person, only the deepest part of the soul itself would say that there's not anything in living such a life. Even the more shallow parts of the soul itself would say that such a life is a life of some form of enjoyment, even if the outcome would be, I don't want to live that. Only the essence would say, I'm not interested in such a life, and therefore thank you specifically for the spiritual side of my life. Now the two lessons is that, again, from the fifth explanation, that you can go through your day knowing that you have this connection with God, and that can power every single action you have during your day to strengthen that connection, that you know you have that connection no matter what, etc. And from the first explanation that we went back to, you can know that this is what you consider important. This, deep down, is what you care about. And therefore you'll act accordingly. Or you at least think about acting accordingly. Thank you for sticking with us till the end. This is Jewish Life 101, and I wish you an amazing, wonderful rest of your day. Did you enjoy today's episode? Feel free to share with a friend. Here at Jewish Life 101, we spend many hours on every single episode, and it's all with your support. Just click the link in the description to find out more, and we'll see you next time on Jewish Life 101.